GS Test 4 cohort 7 solution. Cleansing elections is the most important route to improve the ethical standard in the politics to curb the corruption and rectify the maladmin. Clean election refer to the fair and transparent process, practice and funding, violence-free and overall smooth conduct of election. The behavior of the voters, the value system of political parties, the role of institutions like the EIC are fundamental for ensuring the clean election of India. The need for the clean election and improving ethical standards in the politics is for transparency in election. Political parties should come under the Right to Information Act 2005 to ensure the transparency in the electoral politics. The voting behavior. The voters must reject the culture of the freebies and the vote buying, rather should vote based on the values and principles and the pertinent issues. Impartiality of the ECI. There has been allegation that the ECI was favoring the rural party while enforcing the model code of conduct. Clean election brings the trust in institutions like the ECI, which is very important in a democracy. The need of the clean election for removing corruption from India. For the clean funding, the black money is central to the issue of political corruption in India. It distorts the level playing field and reduces the accountability in the political governance. As per the report of the ADR, the political parties receive 69% of the funding in an opaque manner. To break the crony capitalism nexus, a donation above the certain limits be made public and introduction to the cap of 7.5% on the net profit of the company can break the corporate political nexus to help in removing corruption. Need of the clean election and rectifying the maladministration. Decriminalization of the politics, sticking to the rule of the law, implementation of the RPA 1951 awareness among the voters will help to remove the perception of the criminal politicians as a political asset. Reduction in the influence of the muscle power will ultimately improve the maladministration. For the good governance, the vote bank politics where the voters essentially vote based on the caste, class and sex, language, religion needs to do away so that the voters can vote based on the performance of the political parties rather than the short-term benefit. For cleansing election following the reforms can be implemented. The various research groups, including the Indrajit Gupta Committee, Second ARC Law Commission of India, have favored the state funding for elections. Political parties must be brought under RTI Act 2005 for the transparent electoral governance. Strengthening the ECI by amending the RPA 1951, reducing the dependency upon the central government for the money and manpower, among others. Reduce the high cost of campaigning to provide a level playing field as suggested by the Venkatacharya Committee. Judiciary has tried to clean up the election through the landmark judgment like the Prahari case, Lily Thomas case, etc. However, the next set of reforms have to come from the legislature to display political will for the clean, ethical, money, muscle, power-free election. The steps taken for improving the electoral governance in the country is this decriminalization of the politics, various judicial pronouncements and the measures, including the mandatory declaration of criminal record disqualification from contesting elections, voter education and awareness, ECI program like SWEEP, systematic voter education and electoral participation has helped in the highest ever voter turnout 67% in the 2019 general election. Introduction of the voter verifiable paper audit trail (VVPAT) machine to increase accountability through the cross-checking the result of the EVM with the paper auditing. Or action against the politicians with the money power. The ECI also cancelled the election in the Vellore constituency in the Tamil Nadu due to the presence of the large unaccounted cash in the constituency. The role of the CAG as the highest auditing authority is interestingly linked to augmenting the efficacy of the government policies and undertakings. In this context, examine how the independent and efficient working of the CAG can ensure the good governance. Established under the Article 148, the Comptroller or the General of India is the guardian of the public purse and is empowered to audit all the receipts and expenditure of the Union and the state government, including the bodies substantially financed by the government. His duty is to uphold the Constitution of India and the laws of the Parliament in the field of financial admin. Independence of CAG is ensured through CAG can be removed in the manner same as a Supreme Court judge. CAG is not eligible to hold any government office after retirement. His salary and other service condition cannot be varied to his disadvantage after appointment. Salary allowances and pension are charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India. In this regard, an independent and efficient CAG can play a significant role in good governance. Through the Public Account Committee, na, CAG is the eyes of the Public Account Committee. He provides the audit report and guides them through these audit reports. He also plays an important role. The PAC plays an important role in ensuring the financial accountability of the executive through the audit reports. He submits his audit reports of the center to the President Governor, who shall in turn place them before the Parliament or the state legislature. He also audited the public sector company and other government undertakings to ensure the public funds are being used prudently. Anti-corruption. The CAG reports have been used in the past for unearthing corruption, corrupt practices and impropriation of the money. For instance, 2G spectrum case came to light based on the CAG report. Through the proprietary audit, the CAG can look into the wisdom, faithfulness, and economy of the government expenditure. He can comment on the wastefulness and the extravagance of the expenditure. However, there are certain limitations and inability of the CAG in ensuring good governance. CAG today is primary cause of widespreading unwillingness to decide and act. Auditing has repressive and negative influences. CAG is appointed through recommendation of the government of the day, therefore, him being critical of government can be suspected. The CAG may not know how much more administration, therefore, they provide a narrow perspective. Appointment of the retired CAG to the various government affiliated committees and the institution raise a question on the political neutrality. These limitations can be addressed through the following reforms. CAG report should be made such that it leads to better admin practices, not just a criticism of the past act. A collegium type mechanism to choose a new CAG on the lines of selecting a chief vigilance commissioner. CAG should be established as a multi-member body to improve overall capacity as well as bring in different viewpoints. Any post-retirement affiliation with any organization, public-private, should be prohibited. CAG should not only be independent but also seen to be independent. Accountability of the executive to the legislature, financial proprietary, and the public trust are an essential component of the good governance. CAG has the important role in strengthening all the elements of the good governance. देखो अम्बेडकर ने क्या कहा था कि I am of the opinion that this dignitary or office is probably the most important officer in the Constitution of India. He is the one man who is going to see that the expenses voted by the Parliament are not exceeded or varied from what has been laid down by the Parliament in the Appropriation Act. Recent Foreign Contribution Regulation Act amendment is a blunt instrument that has led to considerable shrink in the working space for the NGO and the civil society. Discuss. The Foreign Contribution Regulation Act (FCRA) 2010 is an act of the Parliament that regulates the acceptance and utilization of the foreign donation and prohibit the use of the foreign fund for any activity that is detrimental to the national interest. FCRA is applicable on all the entities that seek to receive the foreign funds. The FCRA 2020 amendment is introduced through following changes. Utilization. NGOs can only use 20% reduced from 50% of the funds for administrative requirement. Transfer. The amendment prohibits the transfer of the foreign contribution to any other person. Prohibition list adds a public servant, that is any person on the public duty or on the government pay, to the prohibition list for receiving foreign contribution. Violation restricts the usage of the unutilized fund based on the summary inquiry. Account. FCRA account can only be opened in a designated branch of the SBI in the New Delhi. The amendment aims at strengthening the compliance mechanism, enhancing the transparency and accountability in receiving and utilization of the foreign contribution, facilitating the genuine NGOs who are working for the welfare of the society. However, critics have pointed out that these amendments have led to considerable shrink in working space for NGO and civil society because human resource Crunch for the NGO, civil society participation, public servant along with the journalist form a significant section in giving leadership now prohibited. For instance, Dr. Mehta, an IAS, is associated with the Jaipur food. The limit on administrative expenses will lead to cuts in the human resources available. The reduction in the funds available. Over-regulation may lead to decrease in the foreign donation, leading to the closing down of the NGOs. For instance, Amnesty International wrapping up its Indian operations. Job loss. It impacts the livelihood of the workers associated with the small NGOs due to the cap on the admin expenses. Collaboration. It will severely impact the collaborative work among the NGO in the defense sector as organizations receiving foreign funds will no longer be able to transfer them to small NGO working at all the grassroots levels. Smaller NGOs may not be able to comply with the guidelines like opening a FCRA account in Delhi. This may lead to the decrease in the efficiency and decline in geographical reach of the NGO. Following reforms can be considered to address the above issues. External internal auditing of the account can be adopted instead of prohibiting transfer of amount from one account to another. Salaries can be kept out of admin expenses, subcategorizing of the NGOs instead of putting them in a single basket. The government needs to play a balanced role in controlling the miscreant and encouraging the honest NGO, thus making them an active and efficient partner in the development of the country. What are the provisions of the National Rare Disease Policy 2021 and how it will augment the effective and the safe treatment for the rare diseases? The WHO defines a rare disease as lifelong disease or disorder with a prevalence of less than or equal to 1% per thousand population. For example, cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, hemophilia, etc. The Ministry of the Health and Family Welfare has approved the National Rare Disease Policy 2021. Key provisions of the National Rare Disease Policy 2021 are early screening and prevention through the Nidan Kendra, early intervention center, counseling risky parents, etc. Strengthen tertiary health through the grant for setting up the diagnostic facility, lowering the cost of treatment through the local production of medicines, and indigenous research through a national consortium. The creation of a national hospital-based registry of the rare diseases to make the data available for definition, research, and development. A crowdfunding mechanism in which corporates and the individuals will be encouraged to extend the financial support for the treatment of the rare diseases. A provision for the financial support up to 20 lakhs under umbrella scheme of Rashtriya Arogya Nidhi to eligible beneficiaries. The National Rare Disease Policy 2021 will augment the effective and safe treatment for the rare disease in the following ways. Provide critical information as relatively little is known about the rare disease, especially in the Indian context. Increase availability and accessibility to medicine through the local production, which will reduce the morbidity and mortality in the rare disease patients. The cost of treatment of the rare disease is highly expensive. Government support reduces financial burden. Addresses the lack of adequate screening and the diagnostic facilities that are critical for the treatment. However, rare disease advocacy and support groups have raised the concern related to policy because of several discrepancies like many rare diseases require the lifelong treatment and 20 lakh support is inadequate for such patients. The policy says that the crowdfunding can be used to provide financial support. However, funding through the crowdsourcing may not be viable and sustainable. The domestic capacity to manufacture rare disease medicine is abysmal. The local production of the medication will be a challenge. To address these concerns, following steps can be taken: strengthening the local manufacturing capacity through the institutional support, building the awareness regarding the rare diseases among the people in primary care physicians, while the National Rare Disease Policy 2021 is a welcome step. Implementing the text in the context should be done diligently. What do you mean by the civil society organization? Evaluate the role of the civil society in tackling challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The civil society organization is an umbrella term for the non-governmental and non-business voluntary organization that have a presence in the public life and that manifest interest as will of the members. The CSOs form the backbone of a democracy and often referred to as the third sector after government and commerce. The CSOs include the NGO like the Amnesty International, labor union like Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, Social movements rallying around a specific cause like Indian August Corruption Association for Democratic Reform. During the initial phase of COVID-19 associated lockdown, CSO played very limited role due to following reason. Unpredictable nature of the COVID-19 pandemic during initial days created confusion over the role of not just the CSOs but also the governments and the private sector, the lack of clarity. The government did not involve the CSO during the initial response to the pandemic. During lockdown, the people to the people contact was discouraged, leading to the reduced CSO activity. The government diverted funds to healthcare interventions while the private sector suffered huge losses due to the halting of the economic activities. This resulted in the resource crunch on the CSO. However, as a clear picture of the pandemic emerged, the CSO played a more active role in the COVID management, especially the smaller need-based CSOs. These CSOs made substantial contribution in the following fields. They provided humanitarian relief in the form of free meals. There were 9 states and UTs where NGOs fed more than 75% of the people who were provided meals during the lockdown, provided shelter to the homeless, daily wage worker, and urban poor families, supported the government in setting up the health camps, operated ambulance services, extended support for the distribution of the PPEs, masks, and sanitizer for the community workers and the volunteers. For instance, the Kudam Shri prepared and sold more than 50 lakh cotton masks, 10,000 liters of sanitizer, ran community kitchen to serve the needy, identifying the hotspot and the deputing volunteers and the caregivers to deliver the services to the elderly, people with disabilities, children, transgender, and other vulnerable groups. The coordinating effort and the working closely with the admin and the government. For instance, in the Dharavi, volunteers went from house to house to trace and eventually control the spread of virus, developing communication strategy in the different vernacular, whereby they become active partners in creating awareness at the community level so that the COVID-19 spread is tightly controlled. Ensuring the funds to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic reach the destination. It has helped in tackling corruption and holding the government officials accountable. The CSOs have the tremendous potential to contribute meaningfully in vaccination drive, as seen in the case of the polio and the smallpox vaccination. However, this potential remains underutilized due to various constraints like the limited vaccine availability, resources crunch, etc. The future of a supposed normal life might seem uncertain. The one thing that can be said with a true conviction is that the collective efforts of the individual CSOs and the societies have been a glimmer of the hope. Normalization of a poverty as a feature of the large population overshadows the lack of intent and capacity of the political and admin institutions. Do you agree? Justify using suitable example. See, poverty is often presented as a normal characteristics of the countries with a large population because limited resources distributed over a large population fails to deliver the developmental outcomes, resulting in the perpetual poverty. Further, large population means a lower per capita income, stretched national and family budget, ineffective policies to reduce the income inequality, resulting in the poverty. However, scholars have refused this claim and established that the large population is a result of poverty and not the other way around. In the poverty and deprivation, people have incentive to have more children because of the lower survival rates of infants, resulting in the rapid population rise. Abhijit Banerjee, in his book Poor Economics, have explained how resources need of the large population is represented as an excuse for the poverty. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index 2020 ranked India at 62 position with the 27 with 28% are living below poverty line in India. With the normalization of poverty as a feature of the large population, it has allowed the overshadowing of the lack of intent and the capacity of the political and admin institution in the following ways: hiding inefficiency. As large population is under poverty, admin and government often give excuses of inability to monitor and do data analysis of such a large population and implement policies effectively. Accountability. Poverty results in the poor education and inability to engage effectively with the government and administration. It provides administration a chance to run away from the responsibility. For example, inability to take benefit of the e-governance initiative or use a citizens charter. Policy formulation. It diverts the attention of the policymaker from carrying out the administrative reforms towards the patchy and superficial attempts to reduce the poverty. Example, launching various poverty reduction programs, then reforming social sector like the health and education, which is essential in the poverty reduction. Centralization. Large population under poverty prevents decentralization that is critical for the poverty reduction. Political parties centralize powers and policies formulation and decision making under the garb of the poverty reduction of such a large population. Economic growth. With such a large population in the poverty, it allows the institutions and the government to provide the economic growth as one and only means of poverty reduction without any need of social education and institutional reforms. It not only perpetuates poverty in the form of inequalities as the large population, although take part in the economic growth, are unable to reap the benefits of the same. The government efforts to reduce the poverty will also lead to population control. The poverty reduction requires effective use of technological intervention that will help in poverty data analysis and thereby targeted interventions. Policy reforms are needed with the effective decentralization in order to involve the local community in the policy formulation and implementation. India-Bangladesh relation reflects an all-encompassing bilateral partnership based on equality, trust and mutual understanding despite some unresolved issues. In light of this statement discuss the accomplishment and the contentions between India and Bangladesh as they complete 50 years of bilateral diplomatic ties. In the March 2021, the Prime Minister of India visited Bangladesh to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Bangladesh Liberation War and the centenary year celebration of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. An all-encompassing bilateral relation based on equality, trust and mutual understanding has evolved over the years and accomplished the following: historical land boundary agreement to resolve the issue of enclaves into each other territory, connectivity, restoration of the railway link between the Haldibari, India and the Chilahati, Bangladesh, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative. Bus service between the Kolkata and Agartala, shipment of the goods from the Mongla and the Chattogram Chittagong through the territory of Bangladesh. Defense: the joint military exercise of the Army, Sampriti and the Navy Milan to strengthen the cooperation. Economic relations: in Bangladesh, India's biggest trade partner in South Asia. India's exports to and import from Bangladesh for year 2018-19 stood at the US 9.21 billion USD and the US 1.22 billion USD respectively. India has extended the line of credit to the tune of $8 billion for the infrastructure projects. The multilateral cooperation, Indian Ocean Rim Association, Bangladesh has requested for the Indian support once it assumes the chairmanship of IORA in 2021. Bangladesh has supported India's cause towards a reform in the UNSC. India accepted the verdict of the UN CLOs in the favor of Bangladesh to resolve maritime dispute. The present Sheikh Hasina government has been proactive in helping security interests of India and not allowing the use of Bangladeshi soil against India. It handed over the wanted criminal and punished the members of the fundamentalist groups like Jamaat-e-Islami for their anti-Indian activities. However, there are few contentions that need to be resolved for a win-win relationship as discussed below. The problem of migrant. Indian society consider the illegal migrant from the Bangladesh as security threat. Demographic change due to Bangladeshi migrant is a major political issue in the West Bengal and Assam states. The porous borders. It leads to problems in the border area management, thereby creating challenges for the internal security in the terms of smuggling, trafficking, etc. The anti-India sentiment in Bangladesh due to recent developments such as government support to CAA and the abrogation of Article 370. The Teesta water sharing agreement and the Farakka barrage issue have yet not settled the failure of the para-diplomacy. Huge trade deficit of $8 billion in the favor of India has led to political discontent in the Bangladesh. The rising Chinese clout over Bangladesh use of Chittagong port as a part of OBOR. China warning Bangladesh to not participate in Quad. Bangladesh can be a gateway for the development of the Northeast and the Act East policy, further to tackle the threat to often assertive China and the cooperation in the SARC and BIMSTEC. India needs to have the strong bone homie with the Bangladesh. The foray of the China into the Indian Ocean for the One Belt One Road poses strategic, commercial, diplomatic challenges for India. Comment. See, China, through its One Belt, One Road policies, is expanding exclusively in the Indian Ocean through ocean and the land route. The project covers the two parts, the Silk Road economic belt, जो कि land based है and is expected to connect the China with the Central Asia, Eastern Europe and the Western Europe. The 21st century maritime Silk Road, which is a sea based, which is expected to connect the China's southern coast to the Mediterranean, Africa, Southeast Asia and Central Asia. This foray of the China in the Indian Ocean is posing various challenges to India as discussed below. The strategic challenges include China's attempt to secure the sea lines of communication threatens the balance of power in the Indian Ocean region, where the net security provider has the traditionally been India. China's hold in the Djibouti will allow it to monitor the strategic Bab al-Mandab Strait, which is a threat to security of India as most of the exports and the imports happen through this sea route. The development of the Gwadar will allow the China to have the Arabian Sea access for the land, thereby reducing its reliance on the strategic Strait of Malacca. Chinese help to Pakistan in the joint naval exercises pose the threat of a two-front war for India and IUI. The strong China in the sea will threaten the India from the south and the north as well. The commercial challenges include China's making financial stronghold in the debt-ridden weak economies of the IOR nations in Africa like the Djibouti, Zambia, Kenya, etc. to win the influence, the checkbook diplomacy. The Chinese state-owned corporations are unable to outbid the Indian corporate and PSU in the tender contract and the projects such as Hambantota port project of the Sri Lanka. However, the economy's partnership is ending as the economic mastership of China due to unsustainability of the loan terms. The diplomatic challenges include India influences in the forum like IU, Crim, BIMSTEC, and is affected if nations tilt toward China. Indian arrangement in the WTO, UNSC are require mobilization of the smaller nations which may hamper due to Chinese aggression. Indian soft power diplomatic outreach is adversely affected if the commensurate commercial assistance is not offered to the IUR nations. In the region, countries may start playing China card again, such as recent tilt of the Iran towards China and the substantial Chinese influence in the neighborhood like in Nepal. So overall interests are interlinked and impact on the one spillovers to other as well. The challenges for India are plenty, but so are the opportunities. The commercial relations, diplomatic outreach, combination of soft power, hard power with the nations of IUR are the need of the hour. It is necessary to give full effect to the Sagar Doctrine for the comprehensive development of Indian Ocean region and the leverage membership to the Quad. Discuss the implication of Israel-Palestine conflict on the India's interest. Evaluate the India's de-hyphenation policy in this context. The Israel-Palestine conflict can be traced back to the Jewish immigration and the resultant conflict between the Jewish and the Arabs. It has been referred to as the world's most intraceable conflict with the ongoing Israel occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Most recent sound of hostility was triggered by the rocket attack by the Hamas and the disproportionate use of the force by the Israel. Implication of the Israel-Palestine conflict on the India's interests can be India-Palestine. Traditionally, India has opposed the Israel occupation of the Palestine land by the use of excessive force. India's stand on the issue will impact its relation with the Arab, which is crucial for the energy security. Communism in India. An international conflict involving a religion factor has the ability to cause a communal turmoil in India. The Indian diaspora. Many people have been killed in the recent clashes and the airstrikes. Example, an Indian woman in Israel was killed in a rocket attack by the Palestinian militants. Further, an extended face-off can destabilize the Middle East that can cause problems for the Indian diaspora in the region. India-Israel. Both the countries share the multilateral ties as the economic, military, and strategic, technological, etc. Example, Israel is the second largest defense supplier to India. Raw's relation with the Mossad and the Israel aid to India during the war against the Pakistan as well as during COVID. The US factor. Even though the US vouched for the de-escalation of the recent clashes, it has always favored Israel and tries to influence others including India. Hence, India has much at stake with this conflict. It cannot side with either of the countries, which is why the dehyphenation policy seems to be a solution. Dehyphenation is the policy of dealing with two countries having hostile relation towards each other. In an independent manner, dehyphenated look-west policy of India implies that the relationship with Israel would stand on its own merit, independent and separate from the Indians' relation with the Palestinian. With this, India has been able to form the closer ties with Israel, a major defense supplier without irking Palestine. In 2017, the PM visited Israel without visiting Palestine, and in 2018, PM visited Palestine without visiting Israel, projecting an explicit foreign policy stand of dehyphenation. India has been able to maintain good relations with the Arab country. India's decision making in the terms of foreign policy has remained autonomous of the external influence as that of the USA. Hence, it has helped India to maintain good relations with both the countries independently. India has always prescribed peaceful resolution of conflict, and commitment toward the two-state solution is a step in the right direction. International help to India to tackle the waves of coronavirus. USA has lifted the ban on the export of the raw material required for the manufacture of COVID-19 vaccine, ventilator, personal protective equipment to help India battle the second wave of the infection. Russia supply of oxygen concentrators, lung ventilation equipment, bedside monitor, medicine, doses of Sputnik V and other essential pharmaceutical. UK more than 600 pieces of vital medical equipment sent. Assistance package include ventilator, oxygen concentrator from surplus stocks. The France, it announced a solidarity mission for the India under which it will send oxygen generation plants capable of supplying medical oxygen of up to 10,000 patients per a day. The ventilators and other medical supplies. The nations around the world might be queuing up to offer the assistance to India as it battles a devastating COVID-19 wave, but the scene playing out at the World Trade Organization contrasts significantly. In light of this statement, discuss the current challenges that India faces in the WTO. The Indian health infrastructure has been overwhelmed by the second COVID wave that has resulted high fatality rate. Humanitarian assistance is pouring in from across the globe. The US, UK, France, Russia in the form of raw material for the vaccine manufacturing, the medicine supply, the medical equipment like the oxygen concentrators, ventilators, etc. Despite the global help, the WTO members such as Germany, Australia, Canada, Switzerland are offering stiff resistance to India's proposal to waive the intellectual property rights on the COVID-19 vaccine, and there remains the non-consensus for other old concerns of India at WTO. The contrasting scene and the challenges for India WTO vaccine issue. India and the South Africa have sought temporary relaxation for intellectual property patent under TRIPS agreement of the WTO. India's point of view, it is difficult to do the R&D during crisis and demands the transfer of technology for mass production of vaccine under TRIPS flexibility clause. The developed nations initially declined to support a complete IPR waiver. They argue the waiver will have no immediate effect on supply as there is shortage of raw material and transfer of technology will require time. Further, it will set a wrong precedence and negatively impact the future development of vaccines. The private labs have made vast financial investment to develop the vaccines in a record time, so needs to ensure the commercial interest as well. There exists a flexibility clause, such as the patent pooling, compulsory licensing, voluntary licensing, but no country is ready to waive the IPR restriction. This shows the double standards. The developed members of the WTO shows the non-consensus on issues like agreement on agriculture, sanitary, phytosanitary, and other non-tariff measures that goes against the interests of India and other developing nations. The developed nations want India to defeat hunger and malnutrition (SDG) but oppose India's food stocking limits, oppose the MSP regime and PDS of India. However, India says it is essential to ensure the food security. The developed countries promote the use of renewable energy but are not willing to share green technologies. For example, WTO dispute between India and USA on issue of domestic content requirement and subsidies norms for the solar panel. India respects the right of a patent holder, but it is against a patent monopoly. The war against the COVID-19 cannot be won without vaccination. Need of the hour is global cooperation in WTO over technology transfer, financial assistance, IPR waiver, etc. The developed nations must support the poor ones in their ambition to provide food, energy, health security to all the citizens. Examine the significance of the Representation of the People Act 1951, maintaining the sanctity of the electoral politics in India. In the light of the recent events, evaluate the demand of the Election Commission of India for the reforms in the RPA 1951 and the Model Code of Conduct. The RPA 1951, enacted by the Parliament under Article 327 of the Indian Constitution, provides the rules and regulations regarding the conduct of election to the Parliament and the state legislature. RPA 1951 is significant in maintaining the sanctity of electoral politics, controlling the corrupt practices and the electoral offences. RPA 1951 empower the Election Commission of India to disqualify a member of Parliament and Legislative Assembly based on the various corrupt practices and offences mentioned in the Section 129. The free and fair election, the prohibition of the malpractices like the booth capturing, promoting enmity, etc., has ensured the free and fair election that helped in the democratization of the elections. The decriminalization of the politics played important role in cracking the political criminal nexus by restricting the entry of the criminals into the politics of India. The transparency and accountability, declaration of assets and monitoring of the expenditure of the political parties provide much needed transparency in the funding of election. However, there are shortcomings to this act and there is a need of reformation as discussed below. The lack of action against the bribe. ECI had to resort to the extraordinary power under the constitution for countermanding the polls in the R.K. Nagar by-election in the Tamil Nadu due to excessive bribing. The criminalization of the politics through the Section 8 of the RP 1951 prohibits convicted politicians, however, the under trial elector, no matter how serious are the charges, still allowed to contest the election. The controversy regarding the role of ECI. ECI does not have the contempt power. Accusation of EVM getting hacked has reduced the trust about the functioning of EVM. Similarly, there are issues of transparency, secrecy in regard to EVM. In the recent time, the allegation of hacking the EVM, violation of the MCC, such as during Bengal election, hate speech during Delhi election, has resulted in the demand of Election Commission of India for the reforms in the RP 1951 and the Model Code of Conduct. ECI has suggested following reforms in RP 1951 and the Model Code of Conduct. The penal provisions for the paid news. ECI have recommended the introduction of the paid news as the electoral offences under RP Act 1951. The bribing as electoral malpractices. The ECI pleaded for insertion of Section 58B to RPA 51 so that EC can take the action against giving bribe to the voters. This was not accepted by the government. More power to the ECE. ECI must be empowered with the deregistering of a political party under Section 29A of the RPA. Filling of the false information should be qualified as a corrupt practice under Section 123 of RPA. 1951 as suggested by the Law Commission of India. Reforms in the MCC. ECI acts in a weak or the delayed manner against the violation of MCC with the advent of the digital content on the social media indirectly flouts MCC. For example, IT cell of the political parties violate the MCC. MCC should be provided with a statutory backing to make it more powerful. The provision of a fast track court to solve the violation cases at a faster rate. Implementation of these reforms in the Model Code of Conduct and the RP 1951 would only strengthen the free and fair election to promote the participative democracy in the country. The Model Code of Conduct referred to a set of norms laid down by EC of India spell out the do's and don'ts for election. The political parties candidates are expected to observe the norms on the matters ranging from the content of election manifestos, speeches and processions so that free fair elections can take place. While providing constitutional recognition to the National Commission for the Backward Classes is a step forward for the welfare of socially and economically backward classes, it might not be sufficient to improve the effectiveness of Commission's working and outcomes. Elucidate. National Commission for the Backward Classes is a constitutional body under Article 338B responsible for investigating and monitoring the safeguards provided for the backward classes under Constitution Article 15.4, 15.5, 16.4. NCBC was given constitutional status by 102 Amendment Act. The constitutional recognition of the Commission is a step towards the welfare of the socio-economic backward classes in the following ways. The welfare of the BCs. Earlier Commission merely had the powers to recommend the inclusion and the exclusion of the communities on OBC list. Amendment has empowered the Commission to look into the matters regarding the welfare and development of the BCs and examine their complaint. The grievances redress. The NCBC is empowered with a civil code equivalent power to redress the grievances of the BCs related to the non-implementation of reservation, economic grievances, etc. Investigation Authority (NCBC) can demand any document, evidence, record, including from the court or the police, can summon and enforce attendance of anyone for investigation, etc. Transparency Article 3402A introduces greater transparency, making parliamentary law mandatory for the inclusion/exclusion for any community in the OBC list. Development Amendment has recognized that BCs also need development in addition to reservation. Empowered the NCBC to participate in the socio-economic development of SCBC. Center and the states are required to consult the NCBC on major policy matters affecting BCs. The women empowerment. Inclusion of the BC women member in the NCBC will help in the BC women empowerment. Though NCBC is expected to work towards the socio-economic development of the BCs, granting constitutional status alone will be insufficient to improve the effectiveness of the working of Commission because non-binding recommendations of the new NCBCs are non-binding on the government. The issues that are related to the staff shortage, the lack of fund, limited time and expertise, etc., which are necessary for the effective working are not solved by the mere constitutional status. The outcomes dependent upon the implementation at the grassroots level and not the constitutional status. For example, 60% of the SC faculty vacancies at IITs remain vacant despite the NCBC being a constitutional body. The periodic revision, Article 338(b)(5) is silent on the SC order on the periodic revision of the BC's list in consultation with the NCBC. The weakened state commissions. State commissions for the BCs, SCBCs will lose the power in making provision for the SCBC under Article 15(4) of Constitution. Against the cooperative federalism. It is against the spirit of the cooperative federalism and undermine the state government and the state commission. Following measures can improve the effectiveness of the commissioners' working and outcomes. NCBC recommendations must be made binding as suggested by the Parliamentary Select Committee. NCBC must work with the SCBC in making provision for the SCBC and implementation at the grassroots level. The NCBC should be an all-inclusive body representing diverse stakeholders. Adequate infrastructure must be provided to the NCBC for its independent functioning. Through 105th Constitutional Amendment Act, the government has restored the power of the states to recognize their own OBC list. On the one hand, this amendment has empowered the states to take the action for the backward community. On the other hand, it has reopened the door for the caste-based politics in the state. In Indra Swahani case, the Supreme Court had directed the government to create a permanent body to entertain, examine and recommend the inclusion/exclusion of the various species. Constitutional status to NCBC is an enabling step for the SEBC development. The government must empower the NCBC with more teeth in order to make it an effective body. फिर क्या है सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स कैन प्ले अ की रोल इन ensuring the women empowerment and the socio-economic development in the rural India. Explain with example what steps have been taken by the government for the promotion of LGs, SHGs in India. See, self-help groups जो हैं वो informal voluntary group of people हैं who come together to find the ways to improve their living condition. ठीक है. It is a financial intermediary group composed of 10 to 25 women from the similar social economic background. In a country like India where majority of the women faces discrimination and they are living in poverty, SHGs can play a very important role in empowering rural women in the following ways. Economic empowerment. SHGs can empower the women through financial inclusion, thereby inculcating savings and the credit habit among the women. They also engage in other income generating activities. For instance, Kodambushri SHG in Kerala has helped in wiping out absolute poverty. Social empowerment SHGs create awareness of the right among the women. They come together and gain the strength from each other to deal with exploitation, acting as a pressure group against the social issues like the dowry system. For instance, Azadi Mahila of Jhansi have come together to keep the Gram Panchayats free of alcohol shop. Political empowerment. SHGs develop leadership qualities among the women who hold panchayats accountable in the terms of use and distribution of public resources. It enables the women to develop their communication skill to speak at the Gram Sabha public meetings, etc. The psychological empowerment. SHGs enhance the role of the women as participant decision making and beneficiaries in every sphere of life. It inculcates a great confidence in the rural women towards the success in their day-to-day life, strengthening their characteristics and personality. The Government of India promoting SHG through following programs: priority sector lending. The Government of India has included SHG as a priority sector to enhance the lending for SHG with a specific focus on the women SHG. SHG Bank Linkage Program, world largest microfinance project lending to SHG. Women SHG Development Fund was launched to address the issue related to imbalance and state-wise disparity in the SHG Bank Linkage Program. The Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihood Mission (DAY NRLM) launched with the objective of organizing rural poor women into SHG and continuously nurturing them to take economic activities, aim to ensure that at least one woman member from each rural poor household is brought into the fold of the women SHG. DAY National Urban Livelihood Mission aim to reduce poverty and vulnerability of the urban poor household. Under Social Mobilization and Institution Development component, mission investigates universal social mobilization of the urban poor into SHG by bringing at least one member from each urban poor household, preferably a woman, under SHG network. Budget 2021. The Government of India has proposed a village storage scheme that will be run by the SHGs. The scheme will allow the women SHGs to regain their position as Dhan Lakshmi. They can avail Mudra loan for opening the storage facilities. The states are also assisting SHGs. For example, Odisha allowed the empty government building to be used by women SHGs as their offices. SHGs can play a vital role in socio-economic development of rural women. The government should play the role of a facilitator and promoter for growth and development of women SHG. There is a need to establish a separate SHG women facilitator cell in every state that should work towards supporting and transforming the women SHGs. What is learning poverty? How does learning poverty threaten the India's effort to build human capital and achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. Measures to address the learning poverty. According to the World Bank, learning poverty is defined as the inability to read and understand a simple text by the age 10. It is a sign of learning crisis that stifles economic growth, employment opportunity, and reduce human capital quality. Human capital refer to knowledge, skill, and health and people accumulate throughout their lives. India launched various initiatives to develop human capital like National Education Policy, Skill Development Mission, and threatens Indians' effort and thereby achievement of various SDGs in the various following ways. Economic growth and poverty reduction. With the poor foundational learning, students often fail to thrive later in school or when they join the workforce, keeping them under poverty. SDG 1. The lack of learning reduces the quality of the labor force due to the lack of essential cognitive, digital, and technical skills. LP prevent the citizen to contribute in economic growth, innovation, industry. SDG 8 or 9. Health outcomes. The LP impact the health outcome 2 and 3 of a country, which is critical for the human capital. Not only hinders the development of the cognitive ability, but also act as a hurdle in improved health outcome, the including reduction in fertility. The political life. With the LP, citizens are unable to understand their rights and duties. They do not actively participate in the civil and political life. SDG 16. For example, LP prevent individual to understand the importance of voting. Social progress. LP hinders the social progress and the social cohesion. Due to learning crisis, there is a lesser intergenerational social mobility perpetuating inequality. That is SDG 10. Lower level of social trust, high likelihood of social conflict, prevent development of socio-economic skill, tolerance, resilience, optimism, acceptance. Gender equality. Learning crisis perpetuate gender insensitivity, patriarchal mindset, thereby hindering the gender equality SDG 5. Following measures are needed to address the LP, fulfilling the right to education. To unlock the human capabilities and reduce LP, it is essential to ensure that the right to education is fulfilled in a meaningful way for all children. Sound infrastructure. Schooling infrastructure with adequate number of classrooms and teachers are important to ensure access to education. Teacher training. Teachers and the support staff should be given with the proper training to provide quality education to the children and developing critical thinking abilities in them. Cognitive development. Focus should be given on revising and developing the curriculum so that cognitive development of the child takes place instead of the rote learning. Teacher in the mother tongue. It is important as it enables the individual to understand and grasp the knowledge more easily. The term LP underlines how important achieving at least a minimum proficiency in reading ability is as a vehicle to a productive, fulfilling life in the modern world. Just as monetary poverty excludes the people from economic, social, political opportunity, so does a lack of basic reading skills. The COVID pandemic has increased the risk of inequality in learning and the quality of learning. If India has to reap the demographic dividend, we have to ensure that a younger population is well educated. This requires a well comprehensive plan and the community level awareness for reducing LP. A welfare measure success should be measured by how many people leave welfare. Not by now how many are added. Discuss the statement in light of the performance for the various welfare measures undertaken for the vulnerable sections. क्या क्या है देखो. The socio-economic condition in India dictate that the state needs to take care of its population, especially the vulnerable section, through the government initiative. A large part of the Indian population benefits from those schemes and initiatives. For example, Ayushman Bharat covers 50 crore population, National Food Security covers 75% rural population and 50% urban population. The rise in the number of beneficiaries can indicate either of the two possibilities. The socio-economic condition of the people is becoming worse, and due to various changes, the reach of the scheme itself has increased. In the Indian scenario, due to improved technology and administrative reforms, the welfare schemes have reached to previously untouched areas, leading to the higher number of beneficiaries. For example, JAM has made DBT easier, resulting in the higher number of beneficiaries. Another reason for addition of the higher number of beneficiaries under the welfare scheme can be unforeseen disruptions in the economy. For example, COVID-19 crisis led to higher demand for the work under Manganria. The effectiveness and the outcomes of the welfare schemes can be questioned on the following data. Nearly 377 million people live in multidimensional poverty, displacement of the tribes, denial of the rights despite the law. For example, Pathalgadi movement in the Jharkhand against the undermining of the rights in the various parameters like the health and literacy, scheduled caste, minority, tribal, women, etc. continue to perform below national average.
अरे जो आपने चावल, अरे वो जो आलू के पानी से जो बने बचे थे।
Uh, कहाँ चला गया? In the various parameters like the health and literacy, SC minority tribal women continue to perform below national average. Abandoned old people have risen with the rise in nuclear family, for example, Vrindavan widows. However, the welfare initiatives have brought out many positive changes as well. Poor welfare measures like Food Security Act, Maganria, according to Multidimensional Poverty Index 2019, India lifted 271 million people out of poverty between 2006 and 16, the highest in the world. India reduced malnutrition from 44% to 21% in the same period. Women. The welfare measures like reservation of the seats in the Panchayat, prohibition of the Child Marriage Act, etc. The women's mean age at marriage has risen to 22 years. At all women Indian level, 44% of the elected representatives in the Panchayat are the women. In the Lok Sabha, the women membership has risen to 14%. SC and the ST, measures like the Prevention of Atrocities Act, Forest Right Acts, etc. The phenomena like the Dalit capitalism, DICCI, etc., bear testimony to the rising statues of the SCs. Many tribes have regained their traditional rights over the forest and the forest produce. Others like disabled, old minorities, etc. The measures like the Old Age Pension, Ugamya Bharat Abhiyan, Nai Manzil, etc. Many public spaces have been made disabled friendly. Poor old, especially women, have benefited from the pensions. ठीक है? And welfare schemes have produced a mixed results in India. Though need of such schemes cannot be debated, the implementation can be made better. The stopping linkages like the ghost beneficiary using technology such as governance, skill development of the poor under Megandria to improve the productivity, localization of the curriculum to suit the tribal education, for example, Ladakh improved the literacy by rewriting the books in the local language. Welfare is a continuous process. In a developing country like India, with the limited resources at its disposal, it becomes all the more important to assess, revise, and nationalize the scheme so that the benefits of development reach the last man in line. Despite the provisions for the independence of the state election commissioners, recent instances show that they are not functioning according to their mandate. In this context, highlight the various issues in the functioning of the SEC and suggest measures to improve upon them. The state election commissions are the constitutional bodies created under Article 243K and 243ZA for holding free fair election to rural and urban local body created through 73 and 74 constitutional amendment. There are various provisions for independence of the SEC, like the SEC cannot be removed from the office except on the grounds similar to that of High Court judges. However, recent instances like the Goa governments moved to provide the law secretary additional charge of the SEC. Andhra Pradesh removed the SEC by reducing the term of office through the ordinance, etc., have been criticized for violating constitutional mandate. The SEC faces various issues on its functioning as discussed below. अरे यार अजीब हो रहा है तो सारे काम करवा देते हमारे लिए खराब कर
ऋतु जी चाय पियो ऋतु दीदी ऋतु दीदी ऋतु दीदी ऋतु दीदी ऋतु जी चाय पियो
The state election commissions are the constitutional bodies created under Article 243K and 243ZA for holding free and fair election. Hmm. Despite the provision for the independence of the state election commissioners, recent instances show that they are not functioning according to their mandate. In this context, highlight the various issues in the functioning of the SEC and suggest measures to improve upon them. The state election commissions are the constitutional bodies that are created under Article 243K and 243ZA for holding free and fair election to the rural and urban local bodies created through the 73 and 74 constitutional amendment. There are various provisions for the independence of SEC, like as SEC cannot be removed from the office except on the grounds similar to that of the High Court judges. However, recent instances like the Goa government move to provide the law secretary additional charge of the SEC, Andhra Pradesh removed SEC by reducing the term of office through the ordinance, etc., have been criticized for violating constitutional mandate. The SEC faces various issues in its functioning as discussed below. The status. There is a great variation in the SEC status, with many not conferred High Court judge status. Many are housed in the state secretariats in the smaller states like the Nagaland. SEC is a part of time government servant. Tenure insecurity. The SEC tenure can be varied by the state legislature, like in Tamil Nadu. SEC has extendable tenure of 2 years. This impacts the functioning and independence of the SEC. The legal jurisprudence. The SEC lack the legal person and the law officers to handle the legal work. Thus, they are unable to assert themselves in the court. Mismatch in the responsibility and resources. There are 13 municipal corporations, 226 municipal board, 59163 Gram Sabha in the UP where elections are to be conducted by SEC. Infrastructure gap and inadequate funding. The SEC have been provided inadequate staff by the states. Many SEC have reported inadequate funding for the conduct of elections. SEC lack the power to divert the funds allotted under one head to other expenses. The lack of the IT related capacity prevent them using IT structure for the election processes. Also, remuneration for the staff deployed for the preparation, revision of electoral rules and conduct of elections are very less. This leads to operational difficulties in conducting elections. For ensuring proper functioning of the SEC, following measures are needed: the constitutional amendment. The SEC in all the states should be given the status of High Court judge. Article 243K and 243ZA must be amended for this. Uniform tenure. The SEC tenure should not be varied and must fix for a period of term of 5 to 6 years or till the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier without any extension. The multi-member body. The SEC should be a multi-member body as a single selection election commission is more vulnerable to pressure from state government and other groups. Funding. The central government should share some of the expenditures. SEC should have flexibility to utilize the funds as per the priorities without seeking approval of the state in every instance. The SEC should be given the power for the emergency withdrawal of the fund for conducting elections. The funds of the SEC should not lapse at the end of the financial year. The central scheme. The center can launch a scheme for the strengthening capabilities of the SEC. While strengthening the SEC is important, there are also several process-related measures that can be undertaken to ensure the free, fair election. Measures like online voting, recruiting deputation staff will help the SEC to conduct the fair election. The center must enact enabling provision for working of the SEC, especially its funding that will help in strengthening the local election process. The second decade of the 21st century marks a collective failure of the UN and its agencies. Examine this statement citing suitable examples. The United Nations was established in 1945 with the objective of maintaining international peace and security, protecting human rights, delivering humanitarian aid, promoting sustainable development, etc. through the various organs and specialized agencies. Though UN has helped in earlier years by sending peacekeeping missions, ensuring disarmament, promoting development through the MDG disaster management, UN and its agencies has failed at many fronts, especially in the second half of the 21st century. Establishment of an oppressive radical fundamentalist Taliban government in Afghanistan is a testimony to this failure. Other instances include failure of UNSC in peacekeeping. Despite the various efforts of the peacekeeping, UNSC failed as the agencies to establish peace around the world. For example, it is unable to deal with the Israel-Palestine conflict, Myanmar, Syria crisis. UNESCO has failed in preserving cultural heritage. For example, recently Turkey converted the ancient Hagia Sophia in Istanbul into a mosque without any discussion with the UNESCO. WHO was instituted as an agency to promote healthcare of all around the world. It has failed in many fronts, including timely warning and containment of the COVID-19 pandemic. UNFCCC, USA decided to leave Paris deal, and there is no clarity about technology transfer, financial support for developing nations. ILO failure in the workers' failure. ILO has failed in protecting workers and ensuring their welfare. It failed to act against various issues including death of workers in Bangladesh, flight of migrant laborers in India, etc. WTO has evolved as a democratic institution that is continuously dominated by the West. For example, issues related to agreement on agriculture, TRIPS, IP waivers, UNHRC. Though touted as Human Rights Commission, UNHRC has not been able to protect the rights in the various regions of the world. Syria, Myanmar, Uyghur, Balochistan, Pakistani occupied Kashmir, etc. are the regions where the UNHRC is unable to raise its voice for the rights of the people. International Atomic Energy Agency was established to promote the peaceful use of the nuclear technology and prevent the use of the nuclear technology for the military use. However, countries like North Korea and Iran got access to nuclear weapons causing threat to entire world. However, the period between 2010 and 2020 is marked by some success of the UN, such as Sustainable Development Goal was set up by the UNGA in 2015 and the Paris Climate Deal was signed under UNFCCC. 2013 UN mission to Mali to stabilize the country and control the deadly inter-ethnic clashes. In 2014, effective response of the WHO and other UN bodies successfully tackled the worst Ebola outbreak in Africa. Government of Colombia and FCRA signed a peace agreement ending five-decade-old armed conflict. The UN mission in Colombia assisted in implementation of the peace agreement through facilitation of surrender of the weapons and monitoring mechanism. The UN has survived and thrived and has certainly seen incremental changes over the last 75 years, but the time has come for the UN to change for the better. UNSC is in desperate need to undergo the reforms. The sooner the better, the latter the more redundant. In a nutshell, as far as the whole UN is concerned, complete reform is needed, with the principle not to be written by the most powerful anymore. The arrangements like bilateral, plurilateral, minilateral are gaining more traction over the multilaterals in contemporary international relations. Give a recent account for such rise, citing suitable example and the challenges that come along with it. See, multilateralism refers to coming together of the large number of countries for engagement at a common forum. The arrangement of the direct engagement of the two countries is known as bilateral, while a smaller, loose, flexible groups known as the plurilateral or the minilateral, a concept which is recently gaining traction globally. The multilateralism is prominent world order. Post World War II, in order to engage all the countries at a common platform for their collective development, for example, UN. However, due to changing global order and the balance of the power, utility of the multilateralism is diminishing. Today, UN is no more representative of the multilateralism. China disobeyed the ruling of the UN CLOs. Unilateral interferences and the sanction on the Iran by the USA, US-led NATO action on Afghanistan, etc. are the cases in point. Further, due to diversity of interests, convergence is difficult to achieve, such as non-consensus on the various issues at WTO. US has pulled out of Paris Climate Agreement, WHO and UNESCO, revealing that the world is not on the one page when it comes to global issues. Therefore, in the light of the above argument, it can be said that to overcome the challenge of the multilateral and to secure the national interest, countries are grouping into various alternate arrangements such as bilateral, multi, and the plurilateral. These groupings become more prominent because striking convergence of the strategic interest for economic, strategic, and military relations and the range of other domain-specific partnerships such as the Quad, the Lanking Mekong Cooperation LMC mechanism, and the Sulu Sea Trilateral Patrol. Smaller groups give an opportunity to like-minded nations for engagement on the matters of common concerns like the Asian. The multilaterals have not been able to sort the bilateral issue of the parties, creating a need for the larger engagement at the bilateral level. For instance, India and Bangladesh settled the long pending land boundary dispute bilaterally instead of going to the UN tribunal. The rise of the regional minilateral to offer the close interlinkage and the shared vision of the regional issues. The recently revived India's Maldives Sri Lanka Maritime Security Trilateral flexibility. The smaller grouping provide flexibility, non-voluntary arrangement that can be ad hoc and need-based. For instance, the Australia-India-Indonesia Trilateral for shared concerns in the maritime domain. Possibility for experimentation. The mini-laterals offer the chance to explore the new avenue apart from the existing forum. For instance, September 22, the Foreign Secretary of India, France, and Australia met with the agenda of sharing concerns in the Indo-Pacific. It is true that the bilateral, minilateral, plurilateral they have gained traction recently, but the sub-regional forum cannot replace the multilateral due to their limited reach. Both are different but not necessarily mutually exclusive aspect of the interstate cooperation. The important thing would be to ensure that these are complementary with the broader multilateral process, not something that replaces it. The multilateralism is desirable for a rule-based world order which is important for an inclusive growth. The spirit of the Quad is to prioritize the role of the international law and promote a stronger regional architecture in the Indo-Pacific. How can India leverage its participation in the grouping? Does membership of the Quad mark a shift in approach in the Indian foreign policy? The Quad is an informal strategic grouping of the four democratic powers India, USA, and Australia, Japan, spread across the Indo-Pacific. The aim of the Quad is to prioritize the role of international law in the maritime domain, such as freedom of navigation and the rule of events laws. It strives to promote the stronger regional architecture in the Indo-Pacific for the free, open, inclusive region anchored by the democratic value and unconstrained by the cohesion. India can leverage the Quad in the following ways: countering Chinese aggression. China has grown militarily and is confronting with its neighbors like Japan, Vietnam, India. So membership of such grouping would be useful to counter the China tactics and its all-weather friendship with Pakistan. Diplomatic posturing. The membership can provide diplomatic assistance at the international forums such as UNSC. The flexibility. The loose structure of the Quad allows it to accommodate the multi-nature interests of the member states like the commerce, security, climate change, and recently COVID-19 while providing for the incipient expansion in multilateralism. Enhancing engagement. This year, Quad members saw the participation of New Zealand, South Korea, and Vietnam over the pandemic. This allows the India to use the platform to enhance the engagement with the countries world over. New Zealand, South Korea, and Vietnam were included in the Quad Plus initiative to formulate action plans on the COVID-19. Economic imperative of the Quad. India needs investment finance for the infrastructure, technology, and the access to the key raw material, particularly the rare earth element. The other members of the Quad are also looking for the market access and reliable destination for investment. It would be a win-win situation for India and the other members. However, scholars have questioned the rationale of joining Quad because of India is the only country in the grouping that shares geographical border with China and suffer from the Chinese border skirmishes. No country in the grouping has openly supported India in the recent border grievances in Ladakh against China. That is a point of concern for India about the reliability of this grouping. National interest and strategic autonomy dominate the principle of foreign policy of India. This is the reason for India to join Quad. Scholars have pointed out that India's membership to Quad have violated the Indians' long-standing position on the non-alignment. Also, Quad has been criticized as an Asian NATO aimed against China. However, such an assessment is not entirely correct because, along with the Quad, India is also a member of SCO, BRICS, and AIIB and cooperate with the China on the issue of mutual interest. Joining Quad has expanded India's joiners' choices and options in dealing with other countries, thus upholding India's stand on maintaining strategic autonomy. Quad is not a military alliance. It seeks to promote the rule-based order and freedom of navigation, which is in India's interest. India has refused to toe the line of USA on international matters such as the sanctions on Russia and the Iran. The Quad has the potential to maximize the India's interest. It should be seen in the way as Dr. S. J. Shankar puts it in his book The India Way, that India grand strategy in an uncertain world requires advancing national interests by identifying and exploiting opportunities created by the global contradictions so as to extract as many gains from as many ties as possible. India's interaction with the world is no more restricted by the policy of non-alignment but is based on the careful assessment of the condition confronting India, explained with the relevant example. The non-alignment policy is a foreign policy adopted by the India after independence that included non-participation in the military affairs of a bipolar world and not formally aligned with or against any major power bloc during the Cold War. It means independence of the action and autonomy of the foreign policy. It has also been argued by the critics that India's foreign policy is changing with the NAP no longer the main focus. India's foreign policy is now based on strategic autonomy and multi-alignment with a careful assessment of conditions confronting India. Following factors are the guiding force of India's foreign policy in the recent times. The multi-alignment. India has shifted from the non-alignment to multi-alignment. India is engaging with every side proactively. India is a member of Quad, and through Quad, India looks to further its interest in the Indo-Pacific region. India is also a member of major groupings like ASEAN, SCO, BIMSTEC, emphasizing India's engagement in the multiple global front, the need for economic development. India's policies focus on rapidly achieving economic growth with aim to lift millions out of poverty. India is pursuing what is best for it. For example, recently India refused to join RCP that was criticized for favoring China and Asian countries more than it benefit India. Integration of domestic foreign interest. Another important factor is greater alignment of the Indian's foreign policy with the domestic interest. For example, domestic programs like the Make in India, Swachh Bharat, Digital India, Smart Cities was mentioned at various international platforms. Yoga is now being celebrated as an international day by the UN. Security interest. India has become more aggressive towards its security, focusing on the China and Pakistan as danger. India has strengthened its border security and has intensified its defense and security cooperation with the United States. Limua, Koma Kasa, Geosomia. Against Pakistan, India has carried out surgical strikes, put pressure on the FATF for blacklisting Pakistan and exposed the same on the various international platforms including UN. The greater emphasis on the diaspora and the soft power. India is emphasizing more on the diaspora and using the same as the soft power. India has initiated various programs to connect with the Indian diaspora like the Pravasi Bharati Divas and the Web of Summit, etc. Climate change. India has emerged as a climate change leader and is engaging with the rest of the world to combat the climate change. In 2016, India urged that all the countries should make legally binding commitment. India has ratified Paris Agreement, launched solar alliances and announced intended nationally determined contributions. Indian foreign policy is evolving to encompass the growing needs, national security and prosperity. India's Act East, Link West, Project Mawsum, Indian Ocean Overreach, Neighbouring First Policy, SCO are the steps in the right direction. The non-alignment served India well during the difficult years from the mid to the late 20th century. In the present day, where the foreign policy of a nation is primarily dictated by the one's national interests, India has rightly moved beyond the NAP to secure its diversified goals and strategic autonomy. Today, India's commitment to peace has been lived by a realistic appreciation of the shifting contours of a power dynamic.